Good morning, Logan Unitic McCulloch here, and this is my video diary entry for September the 16th. I am in Cedar City, Utah. Just enjoyed a day off yesterday. After 9 straight days of cycling in Utah, beautiful country, but a lot of up and down, and covered 450 miles over those 9 days. Did a couple of short days to try and rest during the period, but was very grateful to have a complete day off yesterday. It's physically and emotionally kind of challenging. Physically, I think you guys have seen some of the other videos, and you know these mountains in Colorado and Utah are pretty taxing. 20 plus mile climbs are common. I think I started 3 out of 4 days in the morning with climbs that were more than 20 miles, maybe not super steep at all places, but up for that long. I think a couple of days, my first 3 hours of cycling, I averaged like 8 miles an hour, which means relatively steep. Beautiful country though. I love Utah, love Colorado too. But Utah is definitely one of my favorite states. It's so diverse, and encourage you to come check it out if you get a chance. Got to see Capitol Reef National Park, which I had not gone through before. Some brutal climbing in it, but another amazing national park. Got two left on my agenda in Utah that I haven't seen yet. That's Canyonlands and Arches. I came close to Canyonlands, but it would have been quite a side trip to go check it out. For the most part, I've been blessed with great weather. I had a rough day on Monday, 2 days ago, coming into Cedar City. I saw the weather forecast was going to change as I was heading out of a town called Panguitch. And sure enough, on Sunday, I got hit with hail and rain toward the end of the day. Luckily, the sun came back out, and I decided to camp after about 12 miles of climbing, which wouldn't leave me near as much the next day up to the top of Cedar Breaks Monument, National Monument. And I dried out by the time I got to camp and camped at a little U.S. Forest Service campground. And sure enough, it rained the rest of that day and through the night. But broke clear Monday morning, and I got an early start hoping I could get up and over the top of a 10,300 foot peak. The tallest peak I'll cross until I have one climb in the Sierras that's about 9,600, I think, and Nevada, none of the mountains hit 8,000, so hopefully they won't affect the weather that much. But unfortunately, about 18 miles into a 24-mile climb Monday, freezing rain started, and so for the last roughly hour, I got soaked, and fortunately there was a small visitor center the top of Cedar Breaks National Monument, and I was able to go in there, and they had a wood stove going, and could thaw my hands out enough that I could work the brakes. Because then I had about a 17-mile descent, pretty hairy descent, a much steeper and continual. Glad I didn't have to climb that direction, but the descent was pretty intense when it's wet, and I was cold. I had my rain jacket on, and kept eating and trying to make sure I was doing all the good things that keep hypothermia away, stay hydrated. But that descent was pretty intense. I could hardly pry my fingers off the brake levers by the time I got to the bottom, because I was trying to make sure I didn't pick up too much momentum that I couldn't slow down when I hit the curves. So that half-hour descent, it was nice to go downhill, but when I rolled into Cedar City and came to the first intersection, stoplight, stopped to check my map and see where my motel was, and thank goodness had a motel stay scheduled after 9 days. Looked to my left, and there was the motel right there, like the Holy Grail. And got checked in, got a hot shower, and oh my gosh, do you appreciate those simple pleasures when you're frozen like that? And the wind was intense yesterday, and more rain. Cold front came through, so I decided to take a rest day. And after I got out of the shower and recuperated, then the kind of emotional roller coaster continued, because a lot of you know that my buddy Drew called me, and he's been taking wonderful care of my best buddy Cuz, my 11-year-old pound puppy. And Cuz has hip dysplasia, just turned 11 in July while I was on this adventure. As a matter of fact, his birthday is the day I left from Louisville on the cycling leg, July 31st. And his dysplasia had gotten worse, and Drew said he couldn't get up, and he couldn't walk, and he couldn't get outside, which, obviously freaked me out, because, when a dog that size, he's 80 plus pounds, gets to that point, there may not be a lot of options. But we put the intention out on Facebook, got a lot of great advice from some wonderful Lyme warriors out there. The more I thought about it, the more I thought it's not unlikely in the least that Cuz may have Lyme disease. He was with me on the backpacking trip along with my son when I was infected at Mammoth Cave National Park in May of 2011. And obviously it's a lot easier to miss a nymphal tick on a dog than it is on a human. So started him on some anti-inflammatories, some natural ones. I'm going to get him a prescription for some prescription anti-inflammatories if he needs them. And we started him on doxycycline. I want to thank a dear friend in Louisville, Kentucky, whose husband is a veterinarian and gave me some great advice over the phone. He's been saying for years he's seeing more Lyme disease in dogs in Kentucky in his practice, and I think that's common understanding. Dr. John Poe is the assistant state director of epidemiology for the state of Kentucky, and I've had several phone conversations with Dr. Poe and met with him, and he said the same thing, going back to our first conversation in spring of 2012, that they're seeing a lot more Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases in dogs. So the great news is Drew let me know yesterday that Cuz did finally get up on his own. I think his hip had maybe slipped out of socket, which has happened before, and it pops back in on its own. It may be more pronounced now at his age, but he's eating. He's going out and doing his business, which is wonderful news. Thanks, Drew, so much for taking such good care of him. And I'm so looking forward to being home here. In less than 3 weeks, I'll be back. I'll be landing in Louisville on October the 5th, along with Drew and Laura, dear friends. And so what else has happened in those 9 days? Laura had given me some intuitive insights to pay attention to the people I meet. Don't be upset if I appear to get delayed, which I never did, but I met the most amazing gentleman, Randy, who owns Mesa Market, in the middle of the Utah desert, runs a farmer's market, has for 20 years. We had these amazing esoteric conversations, and he's going to be one of the early guests on a new internet radio show that Drew and I are going to start later this fall, and continue to cover the topics that we're talking about in the Trek for Truth, and especially topics around human empowerment and the power of the individual, and individuals that work together voluntarily can make an incredible impact in our world, and we can do so much better than we're doing right now with the authority figures that we've ceded our power to through the decades and centuries, that are not serving the greater good and the individual good. And Randy was so eloquent, and in just our hour together shared so many observations of the way to look at the perspective of how life is unfolding, that was so uplifting and so concrete and so real, that I asked him on the spot if he'd be one of our first guests, and he is. So that was incredible. The riding in Utah, as I said, was awesome. Gone from virtual heat exhaustion, riding in the Grand Staircase Escalante, and riding into Escalante, Utah was, I think, my hardest day of the whole trip, because it included a 5-mile climb in direct sun and heat at the end of the day, and it really took it out of me. And 2 days later, I'm battling hypothermia up on top of Cedar Breaks. So, and the last part of kind of the emotional roller coaster is as I got into these national park areas, it was just glaringly obvious that the aerial spraying was far more intense than I had seen through like rural Kansas. And I'm convinced, and I've shared it before, that the aerial spraying is definitely correlated to higher density population areas. And that one feature of the aerial spraying has to do with affecting human health. And I think there are multiple purposes to this spraying, and is the case in so much of our world. The information is compartmentalized, and so many people that are participating in programs that may be destructive to humanity don't really have a clue of what the greater agenda is. I use the analogy of the Manhattan Project in World War II a lot of times to explain this, that in traditional history, it's fully admitted that more than 30,000 people were actually working on parts of the Manhattan Project, but perhaps as few as 6 people ever knew what the real project goals were. And most of those workers were innocently pursuing another end that they thought was the ultimate cause of their work, having no idea that it was really to bring about, the most destructive weapon that mankind has seen to this day. Although I think there are much more destructive ones out there now, hidden in the national security state and in the shadow government. Anyway, the aerial spraying, really disturbs me because it's obvious something's going on. I'm 55 years old, and the skies that I've seen over the last 15 to 20 years as I became aware of aerial spraying bear no resemblance whatsoever to anything that I or any of my contemporaries saw in the first 30 years of life. It's just an esoteric topic that everybody can experience with their senses. Unfortunately, if you're under 30 years of age, you may have never seen a normal sky on a regular basis. But you can, if you just start paying attention now, see what I saw through most of Colorado and all of Kansas. Crystal blue skies without any kind of a long rocket-like trail going from horizon to horizon. Many times seeing normal contrails that disappear behind the jet, the kind I saw growing up. But then, getting into the last week or so, the chemtrailing that basically creates a milky artificial cloud base that covers the entire sky over the course of a day have become so much more prevalent. And I shot a GoPro video, and I'm speaking out about this, and I'm doing a long video here, obviously, because this is an important topic to me, because everybody can look at it and use their own discernment if they set aside preconceptions of what they're told by mainstream media or not told, and just do their own investigation and use their common sense, use their own discernment, which is a big part of what the Trek for Truth is trying to encourage people to do. Trust yourself. Don't cede your authority, your ability to interpret your reality, to judge your reality by evidence and your own senses. And chemtrails are aerial spraying, whatever you want to call it, geoengineering, are so in your face. Some of the images I've posted, I cannot understand how somebody can look at that and think that this is a natural phenomenon, that think that these are vapor trails. It's just ridiculous, especially with all the other ancillary evidence. So, I've written about this in my blog posts. I've done videos about it. I think it is one element of an all-out war on human consciousness. I think people are waking up. People are expanding. People are reclaiming their own individual authority. People are remembering who they really are as spiritual beings having a physical experience. And people that feed off of others, parasites, are deeply afraid of the herd waking up, because the feeding frenzy will be over. And I think chemtrails are a piece of that war on consciousness, along with economic warfare, psychological warfare, educational warfare, multi-layered, multifaceted assault on human awareness and our physical health, because that's obviously, another great stressor, that if people are so concerned with just recovering their physical well-being or just surviving, they're not going to be spending a lot of time looking at the greater agenda, starting to see the wizard behind the curtain. And that is, the agenda of the war on consciousness too, is to keep the greater agenda hidden. And that's a lot of what Drew and I are talking about, along with literally millions of people around this planet who have woken up to the deception, the lies that are systemic. And when you take a good hard look at your own culture, your own hidden history, it's on so many levels that it's very, very disorienting and disconcerting when you start to wake up to this. And people naturally, psychologically go into denial, go into that cognitive dissonance where you can't hold two pieces of information that contradict each other. So in many cases, like in Alan Weisbecker's amazing film Watertime, you see incredibly intelligent people denying to themselves clear evidence that contradicts the official story of certain historical events, like the Kennedy assassination and 9/11, because they can't hold that new evidence in mind and still retain their original belief of what this world's really all about and what they've been taught over the course of their life. And if that grounding, that foundation of our common history is shaken, then who are you? That's the existential angst that each one of us has to face when looking at untruths and trying to realize, what is the truth? Who are we really? Who is the wizard behind the curtain? And who am I to become when I start to realize I've been lied to, and I have to redefine who I am in a world that I'm waking up to. So big topics. This is what the Trek for Truth in my heart and mind is about, and I know Drew feels the same way. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm heading out today to Milford, Utah, my last full day in Utah. And then tomorrow I plunge into the Nevada wilderness on US Highway 50. Some writers have called it the loneliest highway in America. And I'll be probably about 6 nights in Utah because I have to cover long distances to make it from one small town to another. And then I'll cross into California. And once I get one big climb over the Sierra Nevada, then I've got some flatlands, relatively flatlands, leading up through Sacramento and up to San Francisco. So for that long rambling treatise, it's been a wild 10 days. Thanks for all the supportive comments on Facebook, all the wise advice about my buddy Cuz. I feel so much better that he's doing better, and I really think there may be a silver lining to this in that we may find out some treatments that help him recover some quality of life, just like all of my Lyme Warrior friends are all trying to do for each other. Amazing people, heart-based people, and that's the key. Is we've got a lot of power right here. When we merge this with this, look out, no fear. Strength and courage, heart and soul, viet animo, unitic out for today.